Hello everyone, my name's Steve Ball. I'm the Associate Director at the Birmingham Repertory Theatre, where I lead on learning and participation and our partnerships with schools across the city and the West Midlands. We're joined today by Manjit Shellis. Manjit Shellis is Assistant Director at Birmingham Education Partnership, where she leads on wider learning, and Jill Sparrow is Head Teacher of Hillstone Primary School in Birmingham, in East Birmingham. We're going to be focusing for the next 25 minutes on the challenges facing schools as we come out of COVID-19 and move towards a new normal. Will things be the same? What will we have learned from this experience? So I'm going to hand over to Jill, I've asked both Jill and Manjit to speak for a couple of minutes each about their reflections on that, and then we'll open this discussion up. Welcome to people who've just joined us. This is the Future of Schools panel, and we've got two panelists, Manjit Shellis and Jill Sparrow. We're going to kick off with Jill, your reflections as a primary school head teacher on returning to a new normal.
So I've thought about three different areas. First of all will be the academic catch-up. All of the children will have fallen behind academically. But particularly, and that's an area I work in, a very disadvantaged area, and I'm a pupil premium reviewer, but particularly those children who are disadvantaged, that gap will have widened for them. So for my teachers, our priority has got to be in getting those children catching up that curriculum that they missed from last year, and making sure, it was already quite a fast-paced curriculum, making sure that we can meet the needs of those children for this year, so they've got this curriculum addressed. Now, I know a lot of people, and Steve and I have different views on this, will think, let's get rid of SATs, because we've not had them this year, and the world doesn't come to an end. But actually, and actually I disagree with a lot of my staff on this, so we have this debate, I kind of think that you need these exams and that goal, that's something to work for, to keep the standards. A worry that without that goal, that standards will slip. I do, however, appreciate all the problems and the issues that SATs brings. Now, my second point, again, a lot of people will be talking about well-being. What do we do for these children? And in an area of deprivation, it will have been incredible. Well, I know, because I've been dealing with police and social workers, it's been incredibly difficult. However, what I don't want is spending a lot of time on specific well-being lessons. What I believe is that our children are entitled to an exciting, engaging curriculum that's much wider than that narrow reading, writing and maths. So although I've talked about the importance of that, and my children desperately need those basic skills, I've always wanted them to have a wider curriculum. Now that includes the arts, the sports, outdoor learning, cookery, interestingly enough, because our children don't know where the food comes from, and international work. Now, I've always believed in that, but actually the teachers have always struggled to do that academic level and fit everything else in. What we found over the last 3 months, when we've just got a few children in, we had about 30 children in during the really severe lockdown period. So we've got small groups, and it completely changed the way we taught. We were able to take them outside. They were doing gardening. They were doing hands-on work. It was almost like a really old-fashioned curriculum, like, 1950s village school, and we were doing nature studies and things like that. So as well as the what we teach, getting much more about being outside, I think it's to do with a pedagogy as well. So my teachers were saying, because they've got the time, they'd have these small groups of 10 children, they've got time in a science lesson, take them outside, and instead of it being almost like a Blue Peter science lesson where it's, this is what you do, now do this, what have you learned, and you write it down. The children were much more, what happens if, and it was a much more independent, exciting way of learning. So for me, the well-being will come, A, from getting the children back with routines and structures. It will get them back with an engaging, exciting curriculum that's interesting and purposeful and outdoors and thinking about the 21st century. And it's about a challenge. It will have been hard for all parents to be teaching their children. There might not be much new learning going on. They've got to be having challenge. Children need challenge. They don't need stuff that's too easy. And then my last point was about IT. And IT is a struggle in primary schools for all sorts of reasons. It's an expensive thing to teach. You haven't necessarily got the kit. You've got to keep up to date. I have other concerns. I think we need to teach our children to be critical thinkers. The number of different parents and staff and people I've heard with conspiracy theories and all sorts of rubbish and fake news. We have got to teach the children to be critical thinkers, the safeguarding element. But one example which really brought that home to me is when we went into lockdown, all the primary schools were a bit, how do we cope, what can we do? And we were offering initially just a link to some work that they could do and packages. So there's no new learning going on there. So we quickly had to think what we could do. I think secondary schools were ahead of us and they were doing Google Classrooms and it was much more interactive, so you'd got that time with the teacher. We came up with something that was a hybrid, which was a virtual school, so there was videos of the teachers talking and setting and explaining. Now when we asked our teachers to do this, and we'd got a vision, they did not know how to do it. The teachers for that week when we were setting up went into absolute meltdown. They were in tears to my technical person, they were in tears to the deputy. I felt guilty because I have no idea how to do this, but I knew what I wanted. And when they finished it and did it at the end of the week, they were so proud of themselves. But what struck me from that, my learning from that is, we're expecting our children to be able to cope in a 21st century age, to be able to program, and my teachers can hardly do it. We've got to get better CPD so that we can give our children, and the digital divide comes into there as well. When I talk to my parents, have you got the internet? They say yes. What they mean is they've got a mobile phone, they haven't got access to do it. We've got to really address all of these huge issues, the safeguarding, the critical thinking, the digital divide, the skills, the CPD. It's got to be a massive thing for the future in schools.
Thanks so much, Jill. Thank you. Manjit, can you give us your perspective? You're Assistant Director of an organisation which includes 100 schools across Birmingham. Can you give us your perspective on returning to a new normal in schools?
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's in Birmingham we have probably about 500 schools, Steve, you know, across both primary and secondary. I just want to pick up on a lot of the things that Jill's just talked about, because I think she's really, you know, sort of touched on an awful lot of what the future might hold for us. But I wanted to start with a quote from Abraham Lincoln, which says that the most reliable way to predict the future is to create it. And I think, you know, trying to predict what's going to happen can possibly make fools of us. I think at one point somebody said nobody's going to want to listen to guitar music, and that was just before the Beatles. And somebody else talked about the fact that actually, you know, we don't need computers with massive memories. Who's ever going to need a computer with a big memory? And history tells us something very, very different, doesn't it? And there's lots of examples of how what futurology can make some fools of us, perhaps. So you know, so if we are going to create the future, so what is it that you know, that the current situation is giving us the opportunities? What are the opportunities in this very, very difficult world that we find ourselves in? And I think the nudge to education, some people would describe it not as a nudge, but as a disruption. There's been a major, major disruption to how schools are set up, to how they work. Jill's talked about, you know, the skill set that teachers have, how young people are equipped to be educated, to educate themselves. So there's been a major, major disruption to everything that we know. But within that are some real opportunities. One of the things that I just wanted to sort of, you know, paint a picture of is the generation of young people that we're working with at the moment. They've been described as Generation Z. And the Generation Zers, or the millennials, are the ones where technology is just part and parcel of what they do. They've always known technology. Snapchat, WhatsApp, you know, Messenger, all of those things, their way of communicating with one another, their way of communicating with the world is just completely embedded within technology. So for them, you know, looking at what education can provide and the role of technology within that, I think it's just an absolute fundamental. And there's been this disconnect between the lives that our young people experience more generally and their lives within school. And the role of technology that crosses over both of those, I think is something that we're going to need to grapple with enormously, the potential of that technology to really change things. The things that motivate those Generation Zers, you know, they are motivated by wanting to make a difference, wanting to do something, you know, wanting to do something. And, you know, a lot of that, we've seen how young people have really sort of coalesced around the need for climate change and wanting to collaborate with each other, but not just within their own schools, but across schools, across localities, across the country, globally as well. The fact that actually they can connect with each other is, you know, is at their fingertips. They know that, and they can make use of that as well. And then the children of Generation Z, often called Generation Alpha. These are the children who, you know, they come, they're very racially diverse. You know, technology is simply an extension, perhaps, of their own consciousness, and social media is just part and parcel of how they live. Now, these are our children that are in primary school now. These are the children that are in Jill's school. Now, we don't know how the current pandemic will affect them. What we do know is that the way that they engage with the world, the way that they build relationships, the way that they socially interact, and perhaps their parents as Generation Zers, you know, how all of that is actually quite different. I suppose in a way, working or driving down a lane that's actually a lot faster than the lane that the schools perhaps were on. And there is that slight sort of disconnect in terms of the role that technology plays in both those lives. So there's a nudge to schools. There's a nudge which says, embrace the technology, embrace the opportunities of doing things differently. And that's not about just putting everything online, you know, just putting up lots of PowerPoints, but it is about engaging with young people in a very, very different way. They communicate differently. And actually one of the things I'm hearing from lots of schools, and there's varying experiences of how well young people are engaging with the online offers that they've put on. Some schools have done fantastically and got some brilliant engagement from their children and young people. Others have really, really struggled. Those young people have, you know, the whole internet at their fingertips. And in a sense, you know, there's one survey which says 50% of them are saying that they can't live without YouTube. They are going to YouTube for their learning. They are going to teachers, perhaps not even in their schools, but the ones that they feel connected to, who can engage them using that technology. So the nudge. Sorry, Steve.
No, so thanks, Manjit. What I'd like to do is to open this discussion up to thank you both for those really inspiring provocations around the challenges facing schools. I just wanted to open it up to Debbie and Lady and Tom to see if you've got any comments or questions from our panelists, or your own comments about as we move forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I'm an enterprise coordinator with the LEP. So my role is helping schools improve their careers programs and specifically helping them have more encounters with the world of work. And it's an interesting time. A lot of schools are putting careers on the back burner at the moment. Of course, you know, the priority for many schools it is academic, making sure that the students don't suffer too badly academically, but it's going to be increasingly important that schools put careers more at the heart of what they do, and not, you know, not in a cupboard down the corridor. Really looking at how we can help our young people understand the changing nature of the world of work now. So many people, students, parents, teachers, you know, they don't really understand about the local labour market, how the opportunities available in Lincolnshire, for example, the incredibly exciting sectors that we've got. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And, you know, I can honestly say that when students fully understand all the incredible opportunities, and it is exciting, you know, we're at the forefront, Lincolnshire's at the forefront of so many incredible sectors, that does increase their aspirations, and, you know, and that will have an impact on their attainment. So for me, it's how can we, you know, we've got the sort of, I work mostly with secondary school, so we've got the whole issue of work experience, and, you know, how can we now harness this virtual world to give people experiences of work. So that's going to be a challenge going forward, really. But I also think it's going to mean there's more opportunity for schools to give their students access to those encounters. You know, it's not the logistics of getting students out into the world of work are real, and you know, there's other barriers. But actually, I'm quite excited about the prospect of these virtual encounters that I'm looking at the moment.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you. Lady, would you like to say anything?
I'm just intrigued and interested in what you're saying, because I come from a very different perspective. My daughter and I run a publishing business. She is a supply teacher for the younger age groups. But we are getting a lot of books from authors who want to write children's books, and they want it from a mindfulness, from a giving children skills to be in a calm place, or to know how to manage any anxiety they have. And just with what's happening, there just seems to be a big build-up of anxiety in children. So what you were saying, Jill, was really resonating. So that was just where I'm almost sort of listening and taking in information.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I'm an NLP therapist on the side, neuro-linguistic programming, and I'm getting a lot of parents contacting me about anxiety in their children. And I think Jill's right. We've got to put that in a real serious positioning. We've got to think about the welfare of our students, and it's definitely a growing concern, I think.
Yeah. And I guess books and the arts that Thomas is involved in is a way of exploring things in a different way, you know, as an output, and to make sure that we're all healthy, because we need those creative streams as well.
I think one of the things that I think we've seen through the pandemic is the central place that the arts have played online, in terms of people using the arts as part of their coping and healing, and sort of, you know, making music digitally, connecting with people and creating art, and things like that. Those have been the central ways that people have coped with what's going on. You know, and I think there's an opportunity now for really seizing the role of the arts in education, because it's not just young people that have seized that. You know, lots of different people have used the opportunity of lockdown, really, to go back to finding out where their own creativity sits, and doing all sorts of new and creative things. There's been some fantastic work in New Zealand, where they've melded both the arts and the well-being agenda to look at how do we help children to transition back into school and to process the experiences that they've had over lockdown. And that's really interesting, what you know, what people are saying about, you know, the well-being agenda. And some of the research is saying that yes, there's been this you know, massive increase of anxiety amongst children, But there are also those children who've actually found this experience quite freeing. They've been freed up from some of the anxieties that sometimes education can present, especially around exams and things like that. So perhaps these are the older children who found things like, you know, the stresses of both exams, but also, you know, teenage relationships at school when they're quite intense. They found that those have been lifted a little bit. So actually, there's this, you know, it's never very simple. It's never as straightforward as it's just one thing. Again, we're getting lots of different ways that people have had this lived experience, and the opportunity of the arts to help people to sort of unpack what their lived experience through the lockdown has been, I think is incredibly powerful. That, for me, is a real opportunity for schools as children start to come back in September.
Can I just say, as well as the arts, and obviously I support the arts, I'd make a massive play for being outside.
Yes.
I've seen the difference with my children and my grandchildren, very middle class. They've been spending lockdown, having wonderful times, walking up hills and being outside. The children who go to my school, 6 of them living in a flat, not being able to get out at all. And if we're talking about how important IT is going to be in the future, we've got to find that balance and get those children outside and realizing the joy of just playing with sticks and climbing trees, and we've got to make that much more important. But alongside that, what I do want to say, although I talked about well-being, for me, it's not about, I don't want it too much children. We've got to think about children's well-being. I don't want it to be made into a thing, or the poor children that have got anxiety. What I want to do is not talk about it and just provide them with these brilliant, exciting opportunities so that it can change what's happening in their brain. They're not thinking about, oh, I'm worried because this has happened to me and poor me. They're just getting out there and getting involved and doing the arts and sports and learning how to cook and food and all of that.
Thank you all. Tom, do you have any final questions or comments just as we end this panel discussion?
I suppose it's just one of the, not the panelists, but one of the other guests was talking about work experience and the problems around that. And we've got 2 apprentices, and it's a real shame. And I fear that we're going to lose one of them. And he's been carrying on. Well, they've both been carrying on working from home, but as it's gone on, week after week after week, he's sort of started disengaging from the process. It's really tricky, and actually, I mean, we're closed, but a lot of businesses who take work experience and apprentices are closed. And the fear is that, yeah, a lot of those people will fall down the gap, won't they? Because this is the time of their life when they would have had that experience. I don't know if is there anything you feel I could be doing to? Well, we really tried to support him through thick and thin, but it's just he's not really doing anything now. It's a bit of a.
It is very. What's your business, Thomas?
Oh, it's theatre.
All right.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
It is incredibly difficult. My team and I, we're looking at putting some help to businesses to look at how they can support their apprentices, for example, as well as work experience for school students. How we can help keep them engaged and keep them warm and keep them, motivated and learning. And so I'll get in touch with you, Thomas, and maybe share with you some of the things that we've been looking at. If there's anything we can do to support you and help you,
yeah,
happy
please,
to look at that.
Yeah, it'd be just a shame to lose him. But
yeah.